And I'll move 1872 to have in front of us, and we're going to lay this over. So Representative Holland, you want to explain your bill?
Thank you, Chair Nelson. Thank you, committee members. Sorry for being slow getting up here.
It's that time of year and 100 things going on at once. And
It is one of those days. Yep. Okay. So thank you. House File 1872 provides building and permitting standards for churches, synagogues, and mosques and other places of worship to create communities of tiny homes on their property for unhoused people. We call them sacred settlements, and through these sacred settlements, faith congregations provide housing, supportive community, and stability to people experiencing chronic homelessness. This model was developed for the nonprofit Settled as the result of research from the University of Minnesota. It provides permanent housing to residents as opposed to other models that focus on temporary housing solutions. Settled's approach recognizes that these individuals have often experienced significant trauma and need restoration. It's based on a community-first model, inviting people into a loving, supportive environment. People transitioning out of homelessness live alongside individuals who choose to leave their current housing to provide support and stability to the settlement, known as intentional neighbors. Through this community of caring peers, people are able to find healing, safety, and peace. So each of these micro units, otherwise known as tiny homes, can be built on site at any faith community that wants to be a part of the project and then move to a place of worship that is creating one of these settlements. As of now, the type of tiny home used for sacred settlements would fall under the recreational vehicle designation in statute because they're built on wheels to be moved to their permanent locations. Under Minnesota law, recreational vehicles are not permitted as permanent form of housing. So this bill clarifies that these tiny homes can serve as permanent housing on congregational property. It also provides a set of building, sanitation, spacing, and setback standards for faith communities interested in providing this type of housing. The dwellings are not fully plumbed and must be under 400 square feet, but a community space with full bathrooms, shower, a laundry room, and a kitchen is available at the congregation's main building. The residents are offered their own permanent home, many for the first time, so long as they pay a nominal rent and follow the rules set out by the Good Neighbor Lease Agreement. This lease is mutually protective as it provides for safety of the community as a whole and allows residents security in their home when not being contingent on the relationship with the settlement's congregation. I have one of these tiny home settlements just down the road from my house, and I can say with a lot of certainty that it has been a fantastic addition to our neighborhood. We've got a great relationship with the church that is housing these individuals, and I'm really excited to be bringing this bill. I also want to note that I actually had Representative New Brindley, who carried this bill previously, and she was going to come testify with me, but was unable to be here. I have several testifiers who are available, and I'd like to make sure they have time to say their whole piece.
And before we get to the testifiers, there's an A1 amendment. Do you want us to put that on?
Yes, please.
I'll move the A1 amendment. If you want to explain what that does.
I should have it in front of me. I believe the A1 amendment is a couple of technical changes that we made in conjunction with the League of Minnesota Cities, some of the requests that they had to tighten up the language. And so there were just, agreements that we came to on this.
Members, any questions about that? Representative Myers?
Thank you, Chair Nelson. I do want to thank the advocates for making this change. I actually spoke with them earlier about it and defining religious institutions, so thank you for considering that.
With that, all in favor of the A1 amendment to put it in the order the author would like, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion's approved. We'll get to your testifiers. I have Valerie Roy on the list.
Okay. Actually, we have a different order.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Mr.
Please
Chair,
identify yourself for the record and proceed.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name's Ann Krisnick, and I'm with Settled, and I want to do a quick technical walkthrough of the bill and talk about some of the key provisions. But I first want to thank Representative Hollins for touring the community, for offering the bill. We have several of the co-authors, Representative Meckland, Representative Jordan, Representative Daniels, they don't see, so I want to thank them for that. This is a true bipartisan effort, which is always nice to see. Just to walk through the bill, if you look at the definitions, kind of the definitions show the key aspects of the bill. The first, the definition of chronic homelessness, we use the federal definition, which requires that someone has been homeless for a year or more, or repeatedly homeless over a period of, excuse me, repeatedly homeless over the last 3 years for 4 or more times adding up to that year. And it also requires that someone have a disability. So this is a very limited bill. It's focused very specifically on this population that often feels very pushed aside and has suffered really profound loss of relationship and community. And so this model is really designed to address that specific group. The designated volunteers, as Representative Holland mentioned, are people like you and I who are choosing to live in community with those that really need friendly neighbors and supportive people around them. They aren't social workers. They still have regular jobs. They do have training in de-escalation and trauma, but they are there to be supportive and friendly. Extremely low income is pretty self-evident. And then the micro unit is the tiny home. So if you have questions on other definitions, I'm happy to talk about them. But really what the bill does starts on subdivision 2 on the top of page 2, that it allows, if you meet the requirements of the provision, it allows a faith community such as a church, synagogue, mosque to create a community like this on their property. And we know that churches don't often have a lot of money. Synagogues and mosques may struggle with things, but they have land and they have real commitment to help their neighbor. Subdivision 3 is the basic requirements for the home, and much of this was written, the provisions were added at the request of the League of Minnesota Cities, who we approached even prior to taking the bill to anyone from Senator, House Counsel, the revisor's office. So they talk about things like heat and water and electricity and an emergency plan for weather and those kind of things. But I want to just highlight 2 of them. On line 2.15, there's a requirement that the micro units be appropriately insured. And in the letter from the league, they expressed some concern about that not being specific enough. We didn't put a specific dollar amount there because that's really going to depend on what the size of the location is. The existing settlement, which hopefully you all have these beautiful pictures in your packet with our handout. This shows the existing sacred community in St. Paul is 6 homes. 2 of them live the intentional neighbors, and in the other 4 live 5 people who were previously living in the street or in their car or in one place in a shed. In another community, they're looking at a community of 18 units focusing on veterans experiencing homelessness, and the insurance for those would be very vastly different. So we will certainly be talking with any of those faith communities to make sure there's adequate insurance to replace the homes themselves, any common areas in the faith community's building, and for rehoming the cost of someone who may have been displaced. I also want to just comment on 2.28 and 2.9. This is what we talk about as our good neighbor agreement, but it's a lease agreement, just making clear that both the religious organization and the residents have the full protection of landlord-tenant law. And then I want to add, there's one amendment, technical amendment, that's currently still being drafted, and that's at the request of the League of Minnesota Cities, that they would ask that the religious community would annually certify to the city that they have met the requirements of the statute and how that's done. So we are supportive of that. When you get to 2.30, subdivision 4, these are really technical construction pieces, and they were put together with the work of our general contractor, staff from the League of Minnesota Cities, as well as the Department of Labor and Industry, and working with the National Tiny Home Association. So if you have questions on any of those, I'm going to defer those to our general contractor, Brandon, who is here. But if you look them over and you're familiar with construction, you'll see that these are residential standards or higher, especially the insulation, looking at Minnesota winters, so really high insulation factors. I'm open to any questions. I urge you to approve this bill and really thank the co-authors and really all the people that we met with for your willingness to really look at the need for many solutions to address homelessness in our state and recognition of the unique needs of people who are moving out of chronic homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Again, the next person I have is Valerie Roy.
Actually, it's Leah. Confusing.
Representative Hollins, how many more testifiers do they have? Because we've got other bills that we have to get through, and I don't want to have, I want to make sure people, we get it, stay on time here.
Okay. So Leah and then Valerie.
Okay. Welcome to the committee. State your name for the record and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Leah Patton. I am the Executive Director of the Joint Religious Legislative Coalition. Our coalition is a statewide organization formed through the partnership of 4 sponsoring faith organizations, the Islamic Center of Minnesota, the Jewish Community Relations Council, the Minnesota Catholic Conference, and the Minnesota Council of Churches. So when Settled came to us a few years back now with this proposal, we jumped at the chance to advocate for this because of how well it meshes with all of our faith traditions. All of our faith traditions believe shelter, safety, and care for unhoused people is what we're commanded to do by God. In Islam, the Hadith on the rights of neighbors records the Prophet saying he is not a believer whose stomach is filled while his neighbor goes hungry. In the Jewish tradition, the Midrash Tanaim on Numbers 28:2 teaches, God said to Israel, "My children, whenever you provide sustenance to those in need, I credit it to you as though you gave sustenance to me." And in the Christian tradition, in Matthew 6:26, Christ tells his followers, "Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they?" We're called to be vessels of divine grace, and a large part of that is sheltering people who need shelter and providing them with a caring, empathetic, loving community, as, again, we are called to do. Because being unhoused is not purely it's not just not having a roof over your head. It's oftentimes not having a support system that can help you and lift you up when you're going through a hard time. So Settled's approach not only provides physical shelter, but it also provides that spiritual and just empathetic shelter as well. As mentioned, this bill is the result of over 2 years of working with the League of Cities to make sure that we're meeting standards to make sure everybody has a healthy and safe home. And we want to thank them for all the work that they've done with that. We understand that the cities would like an opt-out provision in this bill. And we understand their reasoning for that, but that's something that we can't agree to. And the reason is that this model in particular provides a very cost-effective way for faith communities to live out their faith's mission. And again, it's a very foundational mission to all of our 4 traditions. And it's much more cost effective than other modes of housing, like building an addition onto a faith community building is just completely out of reach for most of our faith communities. So if we agreed to an opt-out, it would essentially say that a city could determine whether or not a faith community would be able to practice their faith in this way, and essentially it would prevent many faith communities from living out this foundational principle of their faith. So for us, this is a moral issue. If we can do something, we must do something according to our faith traditions, and we want to thank you for considering this bill. So.
Thank you for your testimony. Now, Valerie Roy. That's why we ask people to sign up ahead of time so we can get them on the list. And welcome
Mr.
to the
Chair,
committee.
members-
State your name for the tape and then proceed.
Mr. Chair, members of this community, I'm Valerie Roy, age 53, and I've lived half my life in vans, cars, and school buses. I've done everything to live right. I'm sober. At 42, I gained my BA, and never have I been convicted of a crime, had an eviction, or faced foreclosure. But unfortunately, that did not save me from being episodically short-term homeless between the ages of 12 to 25, and until now, 11 years long-term homeless. Add 2,600 resumes that have not procured professional work, and I've proved it's not what you know, it's who you know. Now, I live in a beautiful tiny home. I have access to the church, which I can use as an extension of my tiny home, and I have good neighbors. For the first time in 11 years, I have a community around me. Supported by this community, I have many more opportunities to network, to make friends, and to heal from trauma. This bill would create an opportunity for many other Minnesotans who currently live in cars, but worse, in tents. This tiny house opportunity has been life-changing. Thank you for your interest in finding solutions to chronic homelessness, especially since I would have faced another Minnesota winter in a van. I can only get better from here because living in a car is physically painful. My quality of life is on the rise. Now I'm valued in this community. I'm making friends and I have a new nickname. Before, I was forgotten and isolated. I'm glad you're interested in this model. It's a big step up from the nasty shelters. I thought I'd die in the old Dorothy Day shelters. When I arrived, there was a bed lottery going on. This tiny house model is being considered all over the country, and I'm glad that our state, Minnesota, is interested in this deeply affordable housing model. It's made a big difference in my life to live in a stable home again. I hope in the future this can make the same changes for many others. Please support this bill. It will make life-saving changes for many people.
Thank you for your testimony. And then I have another person on the list here, Tamala Walhoff.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Tammy Walhoff. I'm the Director of Lutheran Advocacy Minnesota. We are a ministry of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America and all 6 Minnesota ELCA synods, including almost 1,000 congregations. I'm here to speak in support of the bipartisan bill HF1872, which some people call the Sacred Settlements Bill. We've been calling it the Sacred Tiny Home Communities Bill because that's very descriptive of what it is. As stated in one of the church's messages on homelessness, God's love in Jesus Christ moves us to care for those experiencing homelessness as God cares for us all. We are called to walk with those experiencing homelessness. This tiny home bill or communities bill actually emphasizes a few different things that play specifically to the strengths of faith communities. One is community, this community first idea. Another is a focus on relationship. And a third is the focus on accompaniment with the intentional neighbors who join and live in these little tiny communities as well. There are many Lutheran churches that have been engaged in local ministries that work to serve people experiencing homelessness, whether it's volunteering or working with local organizations, hosting people to stay in their church for a week at a time along with other churches. But there is really a lot of enthusiasm for this model. We have a few churches that are already ready to say, you know, we'd like to have one of these communities on our property. One was already mentioned, the 18-home place for the veterans. And there are a couple of other places that are ready as well. We have resolutions that are passing in many of the conference assemblies across the state in preparation for Senate assemblies, a lot of interest and enthusiasm amongst churches, including in greater Minnesota. When I think of the affordable housing crisis in a place like Minnesota, it's a big, big problem. It's like a 1,000-piece puzzle. Lots of different groups and programs have different pieces of the puzzle. The pieces that the faith community can add are these pieces that focus on community, relationship, and accompaniment, and really plays to our strengths. It allows us to do what we do best. So I would encourage you to support this bill, the bipartisan bill HF 1872. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Now we'll go to discussion from the members. Any questions from the members? Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative McDonald.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you have another testifier? But you're conducting the meeting, so I'll just ask my question.
Representative McDonald.
Thank you. Just curious, we met earlier, right? We didn't represent it, but the folks that presented this and had some good discussions. And I think I asked this, and if I didn't, I'm asking it now. How long does a resident stay in this, the dwelling? Are they able to stay for as long as they need, or is it open after a while for other folks that need housing as well?
Representative Hollins or Ms. Krisnick.
The model is set up so that people may stay there permanently if that's their need. It would be wonderful if some of the people can move on and be in more stable housing and find stable employment. But for some of these people, they're really challenged with mental health issues and some other horrific background. So as long as they pay their nominal rent and follow the terms of the Good Neighbor lease agreement, these could be permanent homes for them.
Representative McDonald. Representative Myers.
Thank you, Chair Nelson. Thank you, Representative Hollins, for bringing this. I know that there, in the bill, talks about, how many of these homes can be put based on the utilities they have. Have you talked to many churches that have thought about expanding or building more utilities? I'm just interested to see if you're going to, if you've gotten some pre-buy-in from some of the churches to, build onto their facility to help house these.
Representative Myers, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. There are churches that are looking at different ways to provide electricity, to provide plumbing. Plumbing in particular can be exorbitantly expensive. And so one of the great things about this model is a church could add a addition that would house 20 people, but it might cost $2 million. But because there's no government cost and all of this is donated, faith communities are able to do this. So it really is going to depend on the layout and how close things might be to the building, how they decide to do that. All of them are required to have electricity, and as I said, they're fully heated. Plumbing is the issue that some may include and some may not.
Representative Myers.
Yep, thank you for that. And, as we discussed, with my church, I think this is going to be a great thing that the congregations and the groups are going to support and get behind this. So Representative Hollins, thank you for bringing this bill.
And looking at this brochure that was handed out, these look like they're plumbed, the ones that are here. But I know in the bill it says either plumbing or dry compostable toilets. But anyway, Representative Hossain.
Thank you for bringing this bill forward, Representative Holland. And looks great. This is a community, and this is what it looks like. How would people have access to this? Would they have to go to their mosque, or would they have to go to their church? Like the whole homeless people, how would they have this great information to, to have access?
Representative Hollins.
Thank you so much, Chair and Representative Hussein. So the first thing I will say, and I'll let my testifier answer more thoroughly, but what I will say is there's no requirement to be a member of that church or that mosque or that synagogue. Folks come to these programs from all different areas and walks of life. I know that the young lady that I met when I was touring had been in an encampment and was referred to the church that was already doing this work, and that's how she got connected with them. And so I know that's one of the concerns that I've heard from some folks, like, do you have to be a member of that church to participate in this? No, you do not. And I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Representative, that is all true. And in addition, the way that Settled looks at this is once a faith community decides that they want to do this, they work with advocates for people experiencing homelessness in the area to figure out who's already living there in their car, in the woods, in a shed, and whatever it might be, to get to know them. And if people already have connections in the community, we certainly want to keep them. And so one of the testifiers, Todd Fesky from Walking with a Purpose, will address that. But can we keep people in the community where they may already have ties and then figure out who will be the residents? So that's the model that we've used.
Representative Hussein.
I mean, we do have a housing crisis in the state of Minnesota, and when it comes to housing crisis, we are the worst in the nations. And this will address a lot of people, and that also I want to follow up. Would these people stay forever, or would they will be able to help them get their feet back and get their job back and get their other lives together?
And Representative Hollins, I think that was already answered, but go ahead.
Sure, I'll be brief. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative. So they absolutely can stay indefinitely. Of course, our goal is that individuals get the support and help that they need to find more permanent housing, like an apartment or someplace like that. But it is designed to be permanent housing if folks need it to be.
Representative Hussein.
Thank you. It's a great bill. I'm supporting.
Representative Kozlowski.
Thank you, Chair Nelson, and Representative Hollins for bringing this bill forward. I think as we're facing a huge housing crisis, every creative and innovative solution needs to be on the table. I come from a community that has been writing in encouraging the passing of this bill. We have many faith communities and cultural groups actually actively working, and shout out to our Stepping On Up group that has brought forward something similar with our Churches United in Ministry and Safe Bay parking for folks. To be able to come together, we know that the communal living is so important, and being able to have the partnership between the cities and the counties and our faith communities has been really important. And, we need, they're all legs of the stool for how we address this crisis. We actually had a city council member who passed away, and have to shout her out, President Renee Van Nett, who actually had a yurt in her backyard. We have our churches doing these similar programs with respite homes. And so my question for you is around, it's really important for us also to de-risk for projects and for cities and counties. I know that we face some hurdles around like the gas and fire stove and whatnot. And I'm just curious if you could speak to how it is that you might be working with the different entities and the local fire departments and whatnot to make sure that you have everything that you need to actually be successful, and you don't run into roadblocks that either are state or local codes, such as the gas and those types of things that are needed. Thank you.
Representative,
Ms. Krishnick.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee. It's our goal that all of these are considered a community asset, and we want to work really closely with those groups. So immediately, we're going to build relationships with the police department, with the fire department. These are all heated with electricity, so that just takes that risk of flame away. But it is our goal to make sure that we are embedded in the community, and people really are part of that. We will, I don't know how else to answer that, but that's really a primary goal and mission of TUP.
Representative Kozlowski, quick follow-up, or?
No, wonderful. That answers my question. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And with that, members, we'll lay this bill over, and thank you for your testimony, and thank you for bringing the bill.
Thank you.